We've decided we're going to do it like what we would do, not what we think these teams are going to do, because God knows that could be anything at this point. And we're going to have to do some trades because we can't have Chicago actually using the number 1 overall pick because there's just no way that happens.
Yes. So we were debating that pre-show, who we should have move up to number 1.
Right. So the first order of business is who actually wants that number 1 overall pick. I had quite a fancy trade worked out with Carolina at 9. You can get quite the trade haul from Carolina jumping that far up.
Yeah.
But you have to wonder, does Carolina need to jump that far up? And does Chicago want to go back that far? And really, I think when you were thinking about it, Houston makes some sense to go from 2 to 1, get back the pick that was rightfully theirs and they squandered, and just ensure they get their guy, right? Whatever happens from here on in, we're drafting the quarterback we want and we're not screwing around with that. Indianapolis at 4 makes some sense, depending on who it is they like, knowing that they would be jumping Houston and potentially taking the quarterback away from them. I think Carolina does make some sense, but it kind of depends which quarterback they're interested in. Maybe the Raiders are desperate enough from 7, given their inactivity so far, given the fact that they got rid of Derek Carr fairly unceremoniously. That's probably it, though, right?
Yeah, I could see the Titans at 11, too, because if they don't jump up to 1, well, you're going to have to play against the guy who, probably Bryce Young for the next decade. So, it's either we get him or we're playing against him because he's going to go to the Houston Texans.
Yeah, if they love a quarterback, it makes a lot of sense for those 2 reasons because you're doubling the impact that it has. Not only are you getting that guy, but you're also keeping him away from either Indianapolis or Houston.
Yeah, so I wrote a whole article actually about what trades it would take, what value it would take from kind of each of these teams to get up to that number 1 overall pick based on historically what's been the surplus that you get when a quarterback's at the top of the draft.
Right.
The one thing is when you're the Houston Texans, the 1 pick swaps don't usually give you as much trade value. So if you're the Chicago Bears, just 1 pick, because from the Texans' perspective, you can argue you're getting the guy you want anyway, Chicago. Why am I giving up all this picks to you when you're going to get the same guy? But I do think there's a lot of value for Chicago to get that same guy that they want at number 1 overall, especially after the Jalen Carter news. So to be still at pick 2 gives them a guy in Will Anderson that's a game-changing edge rusher, whereas if they move down to pick 7, 9, 11, you're far more of a crapshoot in the guy you're drafting. So for the Houston Texans to get that trade value, what I said was number 2, number 33, and number 104 overall would kind of give them an 8.9% surplus. And the Jimmy Johnson trade value for the Indianapolis Colts, number 4, number 35, number 79, in addition to a 2024 first and third. So you immediately see the price start to rise.
Yeah.
That gives you the kind of surplus value, 24.5% surplus on the Jimmy Johnson trade chart that's in line with historical trades up that we've seen. Las Vegas Raiders, it would take number 7, number 38, number 70, a 2024 first, a 2024 second. You're seeing why teams are maybe saying, in this deep quarterback class, I don't know if I have to get all the way up to number 1, especially when that guy maybe is a mid, almost called him an M word, but is a very small statured quarterback. Then if the Carolina Panthers, number 9, number 61, 2024 first, and a 2025 first is what it's probably going to take to get up to number 1 overall to match that Jimmy Johnson trade value chart. That makes a lot of sense from the Bears' perspective to get those futures first. But if you're the Carolina Panthers saying, I'm risking my franchise for this guy who may not be healthy, or if it's CJ Stroud, I may be able to get later on the draft. Well, I think that's why I think the Texans of all those make the most sense.
Yeah, and the only way it makes any sense for a team trading up and giving up that kind of collateral is the quarterback, right? So, Houston have number 12 as well, but there's no way it makes any sense for them to ever deploy a trade that involves number 12 to get to 1, so they have 1 and 2, because by definition they would be doing that for a non-quarterback effectively, because they're already sitting there at number 2. You're it's a little bit of a mix because you're taking the quarterback at 1, but it just doesn't make the sense, right?
I agree.
Flip number 2 plus the second rounder, whatever you need to give up, and then just get that done. And then you pick again with number 12 anyway.
So who do you want? Who do we want to trade up?
I think Houston makes the most sense.
Okay.
But I think the Bears would want basically any other trade just because of the amount of extra collateral it's going to give you. Like they want the haul for this. They want to be able to have as much as humanly possible and break that down around Justin Fields. But like the best deal available, or the most interested team might be Houston. So
Yeah,
would you make that happen?
I think Houston. I go Houston. Let's go 233, 104 for number 1.
Done.
Have it go through, and we'll go Bryce Young number 1. And again, I think Bryce Young's top quarterback in this draft. We've talked about this. It's just like he is head and shoulders. The fact that he looks, like a child standing next to Anthony Richardson, and people are still like, yeah, I want the child. Give me, they stand next to each other. Yeah, give me the child. That just tells you how good he is at the quarterback position.
He is. You were saying you went back through his tape and just sort of reminded you how good he is.
Yeah.
Which I think is going to happen every time. Like every now and again, you're going to be like, can this really work? Let's go back and figure out why it's not going to function at the next level because he's so small.
Yeah.
And it does. It works. He's good. He's really good. Like his anticipation is so far off the charts. That's the kind of thing that buys you an awful lot of wiggle room by not being able to see it.
It's just like the speed with which he sees stuff, no matter what it is, whether it's pressure, whether it's, guys coming open, whether it's on the move, juking defenders. He just different level.
They, I think it was during the broadcast, might have been Jeremiah saying that that there are a bunch of plays where he sort of thinks that he might not actually be able to see, but is so good at anticipating where everyone's going to be, he just puts the ball in the air blind and sort of knows that it's going to get there at the right time in the right place, which if it's true, is kind of phenomenal. And from his tape, I can kind of buy that. There's a bunch of these plays where the anticipation he's throwing it with are so insane that it's not
couldn't have seen it.
Yeah. Right, well, there's nothing to see at that point.
Yeah.
You're just sort of plotting out where the things are going to end up and putting the ball in the air.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so Chicago on the clock will pick 2. They're drafting Will Anderson.
Will Anderson at this point. When we were saying it's close between Jalen Carter and Will Anderson, I have Carter ahead just on field, but you're not in your right mind drafting Jalen Carter, even if he gets completely exonerated at this point of all charges.
Would there be teams interested in trading to 2? So could they
at this
trade
point
down
now
twice?
that they keep going? That would, if I was the Bears, that's the thing. You don't have to stop, right? You don't have to, and that was kind of what we said with the Panthers. It's like I don't think they want to give up that much, but if you're the Bears now, you already kind of got some icing on the cake. You already just got a second and a fourth. Why not keep going? So I do think there is some juice to that because I think it's either 2 or 3 if you're the Carolina Panthers that you're looking to move up.
So obviously Bryce Young's off the board, but if it's such a strange quarterback class where all these guys are radically different, and I think there are going to be some very different evaluations about them all. There are going to be teams that don't like Bryce Young's size and will gravitate to the more prototypical size guys. And, okay, Bryce Young's gone, 1 quarterback's off the board, but if you're Carolina or the Raiders and you love a guy, you still need to jump Indianapolis to make that happen. So you're looking at 2 or 3 to make that trade. So I think the Bears should definitely be fielding calls at number 2.
But I think it then makes more sense once Will Anderson's off the board at number 3.
Sure.
So I think we go Will Anderson here, and then Arizona Cardinals is probably who would want to trade back then because it's like there's no, we're going to take Tyree Wilson here.
Right.
I don't. That's not as much as nowhere near as much as like that pick's nowhere near as valuable drafting Tyree Wilson as it would be to the Panthers drafting CJ Stroud.
So the Raiders, the Panthers, or the Titans, which team is going to jump up to get ahead of Indianapolis?
Let's go Panthers. I like
Panthers
there.
Who are they picking?
Panthers going CJ Stroud. Yeah.
This is what we would do?
Yeah.
I wouldn't pick CJ Stroud here.
You wouldn't pick CJ Stroud there?
I don't like CJ Stroud.
Well, then who are we taking at number 3 if we're moving up?
Either of the other 2 guys. I have so many concerns about Stroud's tape up until the Georgia game. And then the Georgia game answered all of them, and I don't know what to do with that.
Yeah. I do like Stroud. I mean, I really like this quarterback class. I like all these guys in the right situation. To me, that's the right situation for him. Either
it's a good spot.
There or Las Vegas is where I would want to see CJ Stroud land. So if you want to see the Raiders move up here or the Panthers, but I don't think you would sit at number 3 if you're the Arizona Cardinals here.
No, you're certainly going to be looking to get out. Well, let's do the Carolina thing.
Okay.
So what do they need to give up to make that happen?
Carolina Panthers to do it at this point.
Number 9.
Again, not going to be nearly as much. Probably 39 and a future 2.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So
two
number 9 and 2 twos.
2 second round and the 9 to get up to number 3 overall.
Offer it.
Done.
Boom. Accepted.
Resume draft. Draft a player.
CJ.
Grabbing CJ Stroud.
All right.
So, Bryce Young, Will Anderson, CJ Stroud. That's our top 3. And now the Colts are picking at number 4.
Here's the interesting one.
Yeah. So, Levis or Richardson.
This is where I like Richardson. I have them close enough on the board that I think, again, fit where you're landing matters with Shane Steichen, what he did with Jalen Hurts. Give him the rushing threat in that offense. Like, give him that. Now, Levis can run. He ain't running like Richardson.
No.
Like, it ain't close. So we saw how creative he was in that running game with Philadelphia, that it can just be put on, steroids with a guy like Anthony Richardson at the helm.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it a bit yesterday. I think Richardson's floor is actually really high. And for a team like the Colts, who should have been better than they were, maybe can rebuild quite quickly. But if they can't, they kind of need a guy that can prop them up for a little bit and do stuff on his own and sort of survive. Like, Levis feels like he does need some more help. I mean, if nothing else, his tape over the last 2 years kind of shows how dependent he is on some kind of help, right? Like,
right.
By definition, this is not a guy that's going to come in and like drag a bunch of guys that stink to somewhere that they shouldn't be. Whereas Richardson might be able to do that just by coming in and surviving through his own athleticism and figuring it out with some explosive plays and stuff. Like, him dropped into the situation that buried Matt Ryan might actually work out okay.
Yes, I agree. I will go Tony.
All right. I like that. Anthony Richardson at 4. So we've got Bryce Young, Will Anderson, CJ Stroud to the Panthers at 3. Anthony Richardson to the Colts at 4, which brings up Seattle, who are now presumably not in the quarterback market, having locked up Geno Smith to, a 3-year, $105 million deal, something like that.
Now, I will say, if there's a head coach GM that has bought themselves enough goodwill with the public to draft someone like Jalen Carter, it would be the Seattle Seahawks with John Schneider and Pete Carroll. To just be like, hey, we talked to him. I trust him. We're going to get him in here. He's going to be a good guy. Like, they could do that. I could see Seattle, if that's the case, come draft day, if he's on the board there. And obviously, we're not going to predict what's going to happen over the next month and a half with Carter's legal situation. But it's a spot where I could see it happening. I'll just say.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're also, like, as much as I just said they're out of the quarterback market with Geno Smith, it wouldn't be insane. Like, the Geno Smith thing is structured in such a way they can kind of get away from it after a couple of years. It's about the right idea for them. It wouldn't be nuts to draft his, particularly a guy like Levis, who might actually need, like, we're all talking about Richardson or a lot of people talk about Richardson as the guy that needs to sit for a year. Levis might actually be the one that needs a little bit of time before he becomes a starter, and he'd have that in Seattle. Alternatively, you basically have your pick of any of the top players at any other position, effectively. So whether you're the guy that says this is time for Jalen Carter, or whether you want the top corner off the board, the top wide receiver, whatever, like, you can get whatever you want at this point.
I'm honestly of the opinion I'd go Jalen Carter here. What do you think?
Man, I mean, he's obviously worth it from just a player point of view. The question is how you feel about his character now, ironically. I don't know. I really don't know. Because it's a strange mix of, like, okay, this is a very bad thing he is apparently said to have done. On the other hand, it is it's immaturity rather than malice, I would say, right?
It was a dumb thing.
Right. Whereas the things that were being used to counter the original Todd McShay report of character concerns, blah, 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 stuff like he paid for some lineman's lunch, every day out of his own college fund, that kind of thing. Like, he might actually be a very nice guy, just immature as hell, and apparently that resulted in the death of a couple of people, or was involved in, contributed to the death of a couple of people if he was involved in this racing thing. Like, if you're Seattle and you're like, we think the kid is good, we just need to make sure he stays on the straight and narrow, that probably is a pretty good organization.
Well, that's why I'm saying that's a good organization in terms of, like, the goodwill they've built up over the past decade.
Right.
So I think we do it. I think we
Okay,
go Jalen Carter.
let's do it. Jalen Carter,
Jalen Carter
number 5. Stops his slide.
Mm-hmm.
Detroit Lions, number 6.
There's one answer for me for the Detroit Lions at number 6, and it's Devin Witherspoon. And I will not hear otherwise unless you have a strong counter argument.
You're that convinced that he's cornerback 1, despite Christian Gonzalez having a great combine.
He's a Dan Campbell corner. He fits there. Like, you watch him play the game, and it's just like he fits the ethos they're trying to build up. And the best press corner in this class, at least on tape. Now, he doesn't have a prototypical press traits, but that's not always, that's not the biggest deal in the world. Jeffrey Okudah had prototypical press traits, and we've obviously seen kind of how that's worked out. So I just think the player is someone they'll want. And truthfully, I want to see him, go to one of the press heaviest defenses in the NFL and get that chance. So I like him a lot, and I don't think there's I just don't think there's like a true can't misser at this point that you're passing up on if you draft Witherspoon.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people are going to point to edge rusher Tyree Wilson. That seems to be continually linked with Detroit, even though I don't quite understand it. I think cornerback is a much bigger need for them. And at number 6, you get to pick who you think is the best one. I kind of agree with you. I think that Dan Campbell would definitely gravitate to Devin Witherspoon's tape. So we do that?
Let's do it. Devin Witherspoon.
Number 7, Raiders, and Levis is on the clock.
That one feels like, right?
Slam dunk?
If he's going to want Tim Tebow, and now this is over a decade ago, but what if I told you this was Tim Tebow that had a cannon for an arm?
Uh-huh.
Was that something you'd be interested in, Josh McDaniels?
It does sound a lot like the kind of thing Josh McDaniels would like.
It sounds like something he'd like.
Yeah. And the thing is, that situation is actually pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Like the Raiders, their offensive line really rebuilt itself sort of during the season last year. Like they fell down to 31st, something like that, in the rankings over the course of the year early on, and then climbed all the way up to borderline top 10 by the end of it.
Mm-hmm.
Illuminor at right tackle played really well. I would bring him back immediately. I wouldn't even let him test free agency if I'm the Raiders. Dylan Parham was bounced around all the interior positions. I think played reasonably well in certain spots. Like that line could get pretty good quickly. The wide receiver, obviously, when you bring in Devontae Adams, is incredible. The rest of them were all hurt. Like if that group gets back healthy, it's actually a pretty good group.
Mm-hmm. I think it's a good fit. I think that's ideal. One of the ideal fits for Levis too.
Yeah. Right.
Bullet.
So, Levis done. Now the Atlanta Falcons are on the clock, number 8.
This one's interesting. I think this is where you go Tyree. They've just been Tyree Wilson. They've just been so desperate for a pass rusher.
Yeah.
Of any sort.
Any impact
outside of grade
defensive lineman. I mean, anybody on defense makes sense for them, but it does make more sense, I think, to grab an impact defensive lineman that can try and do something basically by himself than it does to add a corner who, one guy, even if he's locked down, is not going to completely transform your defense, but the rest of it stinks. Wilson's there. Who else would make some kind of sense? Like, I'd be curious.
Peter Skoronski is their kind of offensive lineman. If they don't get re-signed Caleb McGarry, it would make a lot of sense for them to draft a guy like Peter Skoronski.
Put him at right tackle?
Yeah, put him at right tackle.
Kalijah Kancey is a guy that's starting to be talked about in the top 10. Mm-hmm. They have Grady.
That's a small DT duo.
Yes, that's the thing. He's more of a sort of successor to Grady Jarrett than he is a compliment to him. So that might not make some sense. Lucas Van Ness, the Iowa defensive end, Brian Branch, the safety from Alabama. Like you're on a ton of options here for Atlanta. I think Tyree Wilson does make the most sense for them.
All right, let's go Tyree Wilson.
All right, one more pick, and then we've rounded out our – no, two more picks, and we've rounded out the top 10. Arizona, here's where they're actually on the clock, having traded down from number 3.
Arizona can legitimately go anywhere, right? Like they're just – there's not a spot – except for linebacker. Please don't draft any more linebackers.
Don't do it again.
Don't do it again. So it's just BPA. Who do you like the most at this point in the draft is where I'd ride if I'm the Arizona Cardinals.
I really think that secondary needs help. A lot of help.
Christian Gonzalez would make a ton
I would
of
be
sense.
looking at Gonzalez. I would be looking at Kalijah Kancey as well for the defensive front. That's in bad need of help as well. Mm-hmm. Those would be the 2 spots that I'd be looking at.
Okay. Let's go Christian Gonzalez. He's damn good.
Yeah.
Great athlete. Something they're missing in that
Okay,
sector.
Christian Gonzalez, Arizona Cardinals, number 9. Pick number 10, the Philadelphia Eagles. The Super Bowl losing Philadelphia Eagles, picking inside the top 10, thanks to future-proofing their draft approach. Man, this is like, what a luxury pick.
I know. The fact that you could just get Jackson Smith and Jigba here to round out a wide receiver trio that would be out of this world. You could get a Kalijah Kancey here to basically kind of ease the transition from the last era of that defensive line with Fletcher Cox and Brandon Graham, who are probably, Graham may be retiring, Cox may be on his way out here soon. That gives you another guy to just keep that strength. And obviously something that they wouldn't mind. They've always not given a darn about smaller linemen. So I think one of those two.
I love the Kalijah Kancey fit here.
Okay.
I think this is a perfect match. Like I
Yeah.
think it's about where he should go in the draft. And I think I'm not sure I could put him on a team that I would prefer to see him on more than the Eagles. Like
Okay, let's do it.
He can come in. They're presumably going to let Javon Hargrave walk in free agency because of the cost. I don't think he's like a like-for-like replacement for Hargrave, but he can be the guy that Milton Williams was supposed to be for them, like this actual undersized impact pass rushing.
Don't sleep on Milton Williams. He could have a breakout year. He could be. This is year 3.
This is year 3. This is his year?
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, I think Clancy coming in
Yeah, let's do it.
just makes perfect sense.
I like it a lot.
All right. So let's do the reset, Mike. I think
Okay,
that's
top
what they
10
call
reset.
it. I think that's what they call it in the if you were a professional, as opposed to whatever we are. Number 1, Bryce Young. Houston Texans trade up to number 1 with the Chicago Bears. They grab their quarterback. They grab the number 1 player on the board and the number 1 quarterback, according to PFF. Pick number 2, Chicago Bears fielded some calls. In the end, decided to stay at number 2, draft Will Anderson, the edge rusher from Alabama, the best defensive player in the draft. Number 3, Carolina trade up, jump the Indianapolis Colts, get to the number 3 spot, draft their quarterback, CJ Stroud from Ohio State. Number 4, the Indianapolis Colts sit there and grab Anthony Richardson, super freak quarterback from Florida. Number 5, the Seattle Seahawks grab Jalen Carter, arguably the best defensive player in the draft, only now with some legal issues. They grab him, stop that slide. Number 6, Detroit Lions grab a cornerback, Devin Witherspoon from Illinois. Number 7, the Raiders didn't have to move and still came out of this with a quarterback, Will Levis from Kentucky. Number 8, the Falcons draft Tyree Wilson, the giant edge rusher from Texas Tech. Number 9, Arizona Cardinals, when they traded back, Christian Gonzalez from Oregon. And number 10, the Philadelphia Eagles grab an in-state product, Kalijah Kancey, an undersized defensive tackle from Pittsburgh.